I sat across from Belinda Hart and Kellen Drew in the cold HR office, my hands folded on the table. Belinda's smile was plastic as she slid a piece of paper toward me. My stomach twisted before I even looked down. The words blurred together, but one phrase jumped out. Bonus withheld due to performance concerns. My throat went dry. I'd worked 80-hour weeks for 4 months straight. I'd built the entire $1 million partnership from scratch. Performance concerns. Kellen leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, watching me with something that looked like satisfaction. My voice came out shaky when I finally spoke. Then who got the bonus I earned? Belinda glanced at Kellen. Neither answered. The silence stretched between us like a knife. Kellen's smirk widened just slightly. That's when I knew. This wasn't a mistake. This was planned. They'd stolen my work, and now they were stealing my reward. I stood up slowly, legs trembling, and walked out without another word. The door clicked shut behind me and something inside me clicked too. For months earlier, everything had felt different. I remembered sitting at my desk at 11 at night, phone pressed to my ear, finalizing the last details of the partnership deal. The client had been difficult, demanding, but I'd handled every objection with patience. When they finally agreed to sign, I'd felt a rush of pride I hadn't experienced in years. My inbox filled with congratulations from every department. Everyone except Kellen. He was my director, the person who should have been celebrating with me. Instead, his response was 2 words. Good work. That same night, I'd stayed late finishing reports. The office was empty except for Kellen's corner office, where lights still glowed. I heard his voice through the cracked door, low and deliberate. I need her project under my name before leadership sees the numbers. I froze in the hallway, straining to hear more. But his voice dropped to a whisper. I told myself I'd misheard. I wanted to believe I'd misheard. But deep down I knew better. Small things started happening after that. My weekly reports went missing from the shared drive. I'd upload them, and by morning they'd be gone. When I mentioned it in meetings, Kellen would shrug and say I must have forgotten. Then my presentation slots got reassigned. I was supposed to pitch the expansion plan to executives, but suddenly Kellen was doing it instead. He claimed it was better for team optics. I felt frustrated but kept quiet. I didn't want to seem difficult. Then the client emailed me directly. The message was polite but confused. Why did Kellen introduce himself as the primary creator of this initiative? My blood went cold. I read the email 3 times trying to make sense of it. Kellen had met with the client without telling me. He'd taken credit for my work to their face. This wasn't office politics anymore. This was theft. I saved the email in a folder labeled Evidence and started watching everything more carefully. The betrayal was just beginning. I scheduled a meeting with HR the next day, hoping Belinda would help. She listened with her head tilted, nodding at all the right moments. She called it a misunderstanding and promised to create a safe space for dialogue. I left feeling slightly better. That relief lasted exactly 1 day. The next morning, I received a notification about my upcoming performance evaluation. It had been changed from exceeds expectations to needs improvement. My hands shook as I stared at the screen. I hadn't done anything wrong. My numbers were flawless. Then I realized what had happened. Belinda had warned Kellen. She hadn't been helping me. She'd been protecting him. I felt the walls closing in, the air getting thinner. I was being set up, and there was no one I could trust. That night I went home and pulled out my employment contract. I read every word, every clause, every footnote. I was looking for something, anything that could protect me. And then, buried on page 11, I found it. The clause was small, written in dense legal language. I had to read it twice to understand. It said that if leadership violated project attribution protocols, the original creator retained rights to the initiative. More importantly, they could transfer ownership if moving to another employer. It was designed to protect creative workers from exploitation. My heart pounded as I realized what this meant. They'd broken the rules. They'd stolen my credit. And because of that, I owned the project, not the company. Me. I sat back in my chair, staring at the words. Kellen had no idea this clause existed. Belinda probably didn't either. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than fear. Felt power. I whispered to myself in the empty apartment. They have no idea what's coming. I grabbed my laptop and started documenting everything. Every email where Kellen took credit. Every meeting where I was excluded. Every lie Belinda told. I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was building a case. The next morning I contacted an employment attorney. I explained the situation calmly, keeping my emotions in check. The attorney listened, asked questions, and then requested copies of my contract and evidence. 2 days later she called me back. Her voice was confident, almost excited. This clause is enforceable. If they deny your bonus or alter your evaluation unfairly, they've formally breached the contract. You can walk away with the project. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. It was real. I could actually do this. The attorney's final words echoed in my mind long after the call ended. Just make sure you document everything. If they give you any reason to activate this clause, you'll have them. I thanked her and hung up. For the first time in months I smiled. Not a polite smile. Not a work smile. Real one. Kellen thought he was winning. Belinda thought she'd buried me. But they just handed me the weapon I needed. Now I just had to wait for them to pull the trigger. Back at work I started noticing something else. Kellen was grooming someone to take the bonus I'd earned. Her name was Violet, a newer employee who laughed too loud at Kellen's jokes and always agreed with everything he said. She didn't have half my experience, but she had something more valuable to him: loyalty. I watched as Kellen praised her in meetings for work I'd done. He assigned her to shadow the client calls, positioning her as my co-lead, even though she contributed nothing. Violet didn't seem to realize she was being used. Or maybe she didn't care. Either way, I knew what was happening. The bonus decision was already rigged. They were going to give it to her, and I was going to be left with nothing. I could have confronted them. I could have screamed or cried or quit. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled at Violet when she walked past. I kept my head down and did my work. Because I knew something they didn't. This wasn't over. The partnership was almost complete. Despite all of Kellen's interference, I delivered flawless results. The client was thrilled. The numbers exceeded projections. I should have felt proud, but all I felt was exhaustion. I was working 16-hour days while watching Kellen take credit for everything. Then I discovered something that made my blood boil. An internal report referenced my pattern of insubordination. I'd never been written up. I'd never even received a warning. But somehow, HR had updated my file with complaints I'd never seen. Belinda's work, no doubt. She was building a paper trail to justify denying my bonus. The trap was almost complete. I printed the report and added it to my evidence folder. My attorney was going to have a field day with this. They thought they were being clever, covering their tracks. But every lie they told just made my case stronger. I could feel the endgame approaching. 72 hours until the bonus committee met. 72 hours until everything changed. Kellen called me into his office 3 days before bonus day. He gestured to the chair across from his desk like he was doing me a favor. His tone was patronizing as he gave me guidance on being a better team player. I nodded and stayed quiet, letting him talk. He ended the conversation by standing up and patting my shoulder. The gesture made my skin crawl. "I hope you learned your place this year, Madeline." I looked up at him and forced a smile. "I've learned a lot, Kellen. More than you know." He didn't catch the edge in my voice. He just nodded, satisfied, and dismissed me. I walked back to my desk with my heart racing. Learned my place. He had no idea what was about to hit him. That night I reviewed my plan one more time. Everything was ready. My new job offer was secured. My attorney was on standby. The transfer paperwork was prepared. All I needed now was for them to deny my bonus. And I knew they would. They'd already made that decision weeks ago. Bonus day arrived. I walked into the HR office carrying a folder of documents. I wasn't nervous anymore. I was calm, focused. Belinda sat behind her desk with that same plastic smile. Kellen stood by the window, arms crossed. Belinda spoke first, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Madeline, the committee has decided to award the bonus to Violet this year. She demonstrated better team cohesion and leadership qualities. The words hung in the air. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I just stared at her. Kellen was watching me, waiting for me to break. But I didn't give him the satisfaction. Instead, I opened my folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. I slid it across the desk to Belinda. This is my formal notice of contract breach. As of today, I'm activating the ownership transfer clause in my employment agreement. Belinda's smile vanished. Kellen's eyes widened. I stood up slowly, gathering my folder. You'll be hearing from my attorney. Then I walked out, leaving them speechless. I walked back to my desk in complete silence. My co-workers glanced at me, sensing something had shifted. I didn't cry. I didn't slam anything. I simply sat down, opened my personal notebook labeled Step 1, Document Breach, and checked off the final item. Everything I'd planned for months was now in motion. I felt a strange sense of peace. The anger was still there, buried deep. But on the surface I was perfectly calm. I knew what was coming next. Kellen would panic. Belinda would scramble. Leadership would get involved. And the client would make their choice. I glanced at the clock. By this time tomorrow, the entire company would know what happened. My phone buzzed. It was a message from a coworker I trusted. Whatever you're doing, people are talking. Be careful. I typed back a simple reply. I'm done being careful. Then I locked my computer and went to lunch. The storm was coming, and I was ready to watch it destroy everything they'd built. During lunch I called my attorney from my car. She answered on the first ring. I explained what had happened in the HR meeting, keeping my voice steady. There was a pause and then she laughed. Not cruelly but with genuine satisfaction. They actually denied it. Perfect. You now legally own the partnership's process, branding and follow-up work. Unless you voluntarily surrender it, which you won't, they can't touch it. I closed my eyes and leaned back against the seat. It was real. Done it. The attorney continued. I'll send the formal transfer notice to their legal department today. Expect chaos by tomorrow morning. I thanked her and hung up. For a moment I just sat there in the parking lot, letting it all sink in. 4 months of humiliation. 4 months of stolen credit. 4 months of lies. And now, finally, justice. I started the car and drove back to the office. When I walked through the doors, I felt different. Lighter. Like I'd been carrying a weight I didn't realize was there. Now it was gone. That afternoon, I reached out to a competitor company I'd interviewed with months ago. They'd wanted to hire me then, but I'd declined. Now I was ready. The hiring manager responded within an hour, eager to talk. We set up a video call for that evening. During the call, I explained my situation carefully, emphasizing the project's value and my legal ownership. They were thrilled. They offered me a senior role immediately, with higher pay, better benefits, and total authority over the project. But the best part was their final promise. If you can bring that partnership with you, we'll adopt it as is. Full support, full resources. I felt a rush of relief so strong it almost knocked me over. I can bring it. Prepare the transfer paperwork. We shook hands virtually, and just like that my future was secured. I had a new job. I had my project. And I had my revenge. Kellen and Belinda had underestimated me. That was their first mistake. Their last mistake was thinking I wouldn't fight back. The next 2 weeks were strange. I kept showing up to work like nothing had happened. I smiled at people in the hallway. I attended meetings. I even helped Violet with a report, watching her struggle with concepts I could explain in seconds. Kellen grew suspicious. The client had started requesting direct contact with me again, bypassing him entirely. He'd tried to redirect them, but they'd pushed back. I could see the worry creeping into his expression during team meetings. He'd glance at me across the table, trying to read my face. But I gave him nothing. Just polite smiles and professional answers. Belinda called me twice, asking to check in. I declined both times, claiming I was busy. The truth was, I didn't want to give them any warning. I wanted them to feel safe right up until the moment everything collapsed. My attorney had warned me to stay quiet until the paperwork was filed. So I did. I became a ghost in my own office, present but untouchable. The calm before the storm. Then the client made their move. They sent an email directly to me, copying several executives. The message was blunt and frustrated. We're confused why Madeline is no longer included in email chains regarding the expansion. She created this partnership. We expected to work with her moving forward. I read the email twice, my heart pounding. The client was angry. The company. Not at me. I responded carefully, keeping my tone diplomatic. I've been reassigned by leadership. I'm happy to help however I can, but you'd need to discuss that with Kellen Drew. Within an hour, the client responded again. This time their tone was sharper. Any expansion must go through Madeline, or we'll consider the contract breached on your end. I forwarded the email to my personal account and waited. 10 minutes later my phone rang. It was Kellen. His voice was tight, barely controlled panic underneath. What did you say to them? Kept my voice calm. The truth. You reassigned me. He hung up without another word. Smiled. He was starting to realize he'd made a terrible mistake. The next day there was a leadership meeting. I wasn't invited, but word spread fast. The client had abruptly withdrawn from a scheduled expansion call, stating they would only negotiate with the original project lead. Executives demanded answers. Kellen tried to throw me under the bus, claiming I'd been difficult and unprofessional. But someone on the leadership team pushed back. That doesn't match the documentation we have. Her performance has been outstanding. I heard about it from a coworker who'd been in the room. She said. Kellen's face went white. His confidence cracked for the first time. Belinda was called in to explain the HR file, but she stumbled over her words. They were starting to see through the lies. By the end of the day, 3 different executives had emailed me asking for a meeting. I responded politely, saying I was happy to discuss the project once some internal matters were resolved. I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to. The cracks were spreading, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. 2 days later, I submitted my official resignation. 2 weeks' notice, professional and courteous. But I included one additional line at the bottom, highlighted in bold. As per my contractual rights under Section 11.4, I am activating ownership transfer of the client partnership project. I hit send and waited. 5 minutes later, Kellen burst out of his office. I could hear him shouting from across the floor. Belinda rushed in moments later, her heels clicking frantically on the tile. Through the glass walls I watched them argue. Kellen was pointing at his computer screen, his face red. Belinda was shaking her head, pulling up documents. Then they both went silent. They were reading the clause. The one they'd never bothered to check. The one that gave me everything. Kellen looked up and locked eyes with me through the glass. For the first time I saw real fear on his face. I held his gaze and didn't look away. Then I turned back to my computer and kept working like nothing had happened. The company's legal team scrambled. They called an emergency meeting with executives, trying to figure out if I could actually do what I'd claimed. My attorney sent them a formal letter confirming that yes, I could. The contract was clear. The breach was documented. I owned the project. Kellen tried to claim I was lying, that I'd fabricated evidence. But IT had records of everything. Every deleted report. Every reassigned meeting. Every email. Then someone discovered that Belinda had tampered with my HR file, editing it in real time during the bonus review. He caught the timestamp. She'd added warnings after the meeting had already started. The executives were furious. Belinda was suspended immediately. Kellen was placed under investigation. And the client, hearing about the internal chaos, scheduled an emergency video call. I was invited. Kellen was not. I accepted the invitation and prepared for what I knew would be the final blow. They were going to choose me. And there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. The video call was tense. 3 executives sat on one side of the conference room. I sat alone on the other, my laptop open in front of me. The client appeared on screen, their CEO and legal counsel both present. The client's CEO spoke first. His tone was measured but firm. We've reviewed the situation. It's clear that Madeline created this partnership and has been systematically excluded from its management. That's unacceptable. He paused, looking directly at the company executives. We're terminating our contract with your company, effective immediately. We'll continue the project exclusively with Madeline at her new employer. The room went silent. One of the executives tried to object, but the client's CEO cut him off. You misrepresented this project to us. We won't be doing business with you again. The call ended. The screen went black. I sat there, hands folded, waiting. One of the executives turned to me. His expression a mix of anger and defeat. You realize what you've just done? I met his eyes. Yes. I took back what was mine. That evening, Belinda called my personal phone. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Her voice was shaking when she spoke. Madeline, please. Can we talk about this? Maybe there's a way to fix it. I stayed silent, letting her stumble through an apology that felt hollow and desperate. She offered to reverse the bonus decision. She promised to correct my HR file. She even claimed she'd been pressured by upper management to handle things the way she did. I listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finally stopped talking, I spoke quietly. You filed warnings I never saw. You altered my file during the meeting. You broke the contract first, Belinda. There was a long pause. Then I heard her breath catch like she was crying. Please. I'll lose my job. Felt nothing. No sympathy. No satisfaction. Just emptiness. You should have thought of that before. Hung up. My phone rang twice more that night. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. The company launched a full investigation. Employees were interviewed. Emails were reviewed. The truth came out piece by piece. Multiple co-workers admitted that Kellen had pressured them to exclude me from meetings and alter reports. One person even confessed that he'd been told to make Madeline look bad, so Violet could take the credit. Belinda's file tampering was confirmed. She changed my evaluation scores, added fake complaints, and backdated warnings. T provided timestamps proving everything. Both Kellen and Belinda were suspended pending termination. I watched it all unfold from a distance, detached and emotionless. Part of me wanted to feel triumphant, but mostly I just felt tired. This shouldn't have been necessary. They could have just done the right thing. Instead, they chose cruelty. And now they were paying the price. I started packing up my desk on my second-to-last day. A few co-workers stopped by to say goodbye. Some thanked me quietly, saying I'd exposed problems they'd been too scared to report. I nodded, accepting their gratitude but not dwelling on it. I wasn't a hero. I was just someone who refused to be destroyed. On my last day, I was waiting for the elevator when Kellen appeared. He looked terrible. His tie was loose, his face pale and drawn. For a moment we just stood there in silence. Then he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Can't you undo this? We're begging you. I stared at him. This man who'd stolen my work and mocked me for months. This man who'd tried to bury me. Now he was begging. Felt nothing. You already decided what I was worth, Kellen. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside and turned to face him. He looked small standing there, defeated and desperate. I hope you learned your place, I said, echoing his words from weeks ago. His face crumpled. The doors closed. I rode down to the lobby, walked out through the glass doors and didn't look back. That chapter of my life was over, and I was ready for the next one. My first day at the new company felt surreal. I had my own office with a window. My title was Senior Director of Strategic Partnerships. The team welcomed me warmly, excited to work on the project I'd brought with me. The client partnership launched smoothly under my direction. Every decision I made was respected. Every idea I pitched was heard. For the first time in years, I felt valued. 3 months in, my boss called me into her office. I braced myself, old instincts kicking in. But she was smiling. "I wanted to tell you personally. You're getting a signing bonus. $50,000. You've earned it." I felt my throat tighten. She continued. "You've also been promoted. Full creative control over the department. You've proven yourself 10 times over." I managed to thank her, my voice steady despite the emotion building inside. When I got back to my office, I closed the door and sat down. I whispered to myself, "This is what I earned." Then I let myself cry. Not from sadness, from relief. News traveled fast in our industry. Within weeks, everyone knew what had happened. Kellen was fired after the investigation concluded. Belinda resigned before she could be terminated. The company's stock dipped when investors learned they'd lost their biggest new client. Former co-workers reached out, some congratulating me, others thanking me. One message stuck with me. "You exposed a culture that was destroying people. I reported my own issues to HR after seeing what you did. Thank you for being brave." I hadn't thought of myself as brave. I'd just been desperate. But maybe that's what courage really was. Acting even when you're terrified. I became something unexpected in corporate circles. People talked about me in hushed tones. The woman who took her project back. Some saw me as a hero. Others as a cautionary tale. I didn't care either way. I'd done what I had to do, and I'd survived. That was enough. I wasn't looking for fame or recognition. I just wanted peace. And finally I had it. 6 months later, I received an email that made me pause. It was from the CEO of my old company. The subject line read, "Consultation opportunity." I opened it, curious despite myself. The message was formal but apologetic. They wanted to hire me as a consultant to repair the damage and rebuild their client relationships. The pay was substantial. The tone was respectful. I read it twice, considering. Part of me was tempted. Not for the money but for the validation. They were admitting they'd been wrong. They needed me. But then I thought about Kellen's face in that elevator. Belinda's desperate phone call. The months of humiliation and theft. I thought about my new office with a window, my team that respected me, my life that finally felt stable and good. I closed the laptop without responding. 3 days later I deleted the email. I didn't owe them anything. Not my time, not my expertise, not my forgiveness. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. It's simply refusing to go back. I'd built something new, something better. And I was never looking back again.